Imagine your group has just brought down the largest animal anyone has seen all year. For the first time in weeks, nobody is worried about tomorrow's meal. There is more meat than the group could possibly eat in one day. Children gather around the carcass, adults begin cutting, the fire is already burning. It should be a moment of relief, but the moment the animal dies, another race begins. The sun is warm, flies are already arriving, predators may smell the blood from miles away. Every hour that passes makes the meat less valuable and more dangerous. There is no refrigerator, no freezer, no plastic wrap. And if this food is lost, there is no shop nearby where someone can simply buy more. So what happens next? How did ancient humans turn one successful hunt into food that could last for days or even weeks? The first few hours were probably the easiest. They ate. A large kill was not a private meal. It could feed the entire group, including children, older people, injured hunters, and anyone who had failed to find food that day. Sharing was not only generosity, it was survival insurance. While one hunter might return with nothing today and provide food tomorrow. A group that shared resources was more resilient than a collection of individuals protecting every piece for themselves. But even a hungry group could not finish an enormous animal before the heat, insects, and bacteria began to take over. By the end of the first day, a decision had to be made. What should be eaten now? What could be carried? What could be preserved? And what would have to be abandoned? The environment provided the first solution. In freezing conditions, winter itself became a refrigerator. Meat placed in snow, frozen soil, or a shaded rock shelter could remain usable far longer than meat left under direct sunlight. Ancient people did not need to understand bacteria to recognize the pattern. Cold food lasted longer. But natural refrigeration was never completely reliable. A warm day could begin thawing the meat. Scavengers could locate the storage site. Snow could cover the location. Another group might find it first. Cold weather bought time. It did not guarantee safety. In warmer and drier regions, the group needed another method. They could cut the meat into thin strips. A thick piece of fresh meat traps moisture. It stays wet inside, creating exactly the conditions in which spoilage spreads quickly. A thin strip behaves differently. Exposed to wind, dry air, and sunlight, it gradually loses water. As the moisture disappears, the food becomes lighter, tougher, and more difficult for many spoilage organisms to use. Nobody needed to know the chemistry. They only needed to notice that a thin piece left near the camp survived longer than a thick, wet piece left on the ground. This observation changed everything. A large animal was heavy. Carrying the entire carcass would slow the group down and attract predators. Dried meat was different. It contained much of the same energy, but in a smaller and lighter form. Instead of dragging hundreds of kilograms of food through the landscape, people could carry carefully prepared strips. For a mobile group, this was not simply convenient. It could determine how far they could travel before needing another successful hunt. The campfire offered another advantage. Pieces of food could be placed near a low-controlled fire where heat gradually removed moisture while smoke passed across the surface. The goal was not to throw the meat into the flames. That would burn the outside while leaving the inside wet. Preserving food required control. The fire had to remain warm enough to dry the meat, but not so hot that it destroyed it. Someone had to collect fuel, adjust the distance, turn the pieces, protect them from animals, and keep the fire alive. This transformed the campfire into more than a place for warmth. It became a preservation system. Smoke could help keep some insects away. It could dry the surface and alter the food in ways that made it last longer. The same fire could also make tough foods easier to chew, improve digestion, and allow humans to eat resources that might otherwise have been difficult or unsafe to use. But cooking alone did not solve the storage problem. Cooked meat could still spoil. Fire made food useful now. Drying and smoking made it useful later. While some members of the group prepared meat, others might focus on parts of the animal that already came with natural protection. Long bones contain calorie-rich marrow sealed inside a hard outer shell. If every bone was smashed immediately, the marrow had to be eaten quickly. But if the bone remained intact, it could protect the food inside for a limited period. At Kisum Cave in present-day Israel, archaeologists found evidence suggesting that people transported certain animal bones and opened them later for delayed marrow consumption. The bone itself acted like a package, no lid, no container, no manufactured seal, just valuable food protected inside part of the animal's skeleton until someone was ready to eat it. It was not ancient canned food, but the logic was surprisingly similar. Do not expose the food until you need it. Meat, however, was only part of the ancient diet. People also learned that some foods survived storage much better than others. Soft fruit could disappear quickly. Fresh meat could become dangerous. But nuts, seeds, and certain underground plant parts could remain usable much longer when kept dry and protected. These foods were less dramatic than a large hunt, but they were often more dependable. A bag or basket of dry seeds would not attempt to escape, fight back, or attract every predator in the region. Plant foods could still require complicated preparation. Some had to be peeled. Others had to be pounded, ground, soaked, or roasted before they became useful. Evidence from Majed Baby in northern Australia shows that people were processing a wide variety of plant foods tens of thousands of years ago. That required more than hunger and experimentation. It required memory. Someone had to know which plant was edible, which part could be used, when it should be collected, how it should be prepared, and what would happen if the process was done incorrectly. This knowledge could not be reinvented from nothing every generation. It had to be taught. The same was true for food storage. Before pottery existed, people could use woven baskets, animal hides, shells, wooden containers, caves, rock cracks, and pits dug into the ground. A container did not have to be perfectly sealed. It only had to improve the odds. Keep the food away from rain. Keep it off dirty ground. Make it harder for insects and rodents to reach. Allow it to be moved. Hide it from predators or rival groups. Storage pits could take advantage of cooler temperatures beneath the surface, but they also introduce new dangers. A poorly placed pit could fill with water. Rodents could tunnel into it. The food could become moldy. The group could return weeks later and discover that someone else had found it. Ancient storage was never as simple as digging a hole and hoping for the best. It required knowledge of soil, drainage, weather, animal behavior, and location. A good storage site had to be protected but also memorable. Hidden enough that others would not find it. Clear enough that your own group would. Some preservation methods were probably discovered through deliberate experimentation. Others may have started as accidents. Fermentation was likely one of them. When certain foods are stored under specific conditions, microorganisms begin changing them. Sometimes the result is poisonous, sometimes it is revolting. But under the right conditions, the process can prevent more dangerous forms of spoilage and allow food to remain usable much longer. Evidence from Mesolithic Scandinavia suggests that people fermented and stored large quantities of fish, possibly preserving them through winter. The first person who opened a container of fermented fish, smelled it, and decided that eating it was still a reasonable idea took an enormous risk. But if the food was safe, filling, and available during winter, the method would be remembered. The smell became information. The texture became information. The container, the season, the temperature, and the number of days all became part of a system. Ancient people did not have printed expiration dates. They had experience. They watched the surface of the food. They smelled it. They touched it. They remembered how long it had been stored and what the weather had been like. They compared it to previous attempts. One bad decision could make several people sick. One good decision could keep the group alive through a period of hunger. That made food knowledge one of the most valuable skills a person could possess. Children would have watched adults divide meat, tend fires, gather plants, prepare containers, and choose storage locations. They learned which insects were a warning, which smells were normal, which foods could survive several days, which ones had to be eaten immediately. Over generations, small observations became techniques. Techniques became traditions, and traditions became survival systems. Ancient food preservation was also shaped by movement. A highly mobile group could not carry enormous storage structures across the landscape. They needed lightweight foods, temporary caches, and a detailed memory of where seasonal resources would appear. More settled communities could invest in larger storage pits, stronger baskets, permanent buildings, and eventually pottery. There was no single ancient refrigerator. A method that worked in a frozen landscape might fail completely in a humid forest. In cold regions, people could use snow and freezing air. In dry regions, wind and sunlight made dehydration easier. In wet environments, smoke and fire became more important. Near rivers and coastlines, fish could be dried, smoked, or fermented. In regions rich in nuts and seeds, plant storage could provide security when hunting failed. The real achievement was not any one technique, it was knowing how to combine them. Eat the most perishable parts first. Share fresh food while it is safe. Cut meat into thin strips. Dry or smoke what can be preserved. Leave marrow protected inside intact bones. Store nuts, seeds, and durable plants. Use cold weather when it is available. Hide supplies when the group has to move. And remember exactly what worked. Ancient humans survived without refrigerators because they understood something modern life makes easy to forget. Food is not only something you find, it is something you manage. A successful hunt could feed the group today. Good preservation could keep them alive next week. And the difference between abundance and hunger was often not the size of the animal they killed, but the decisions they made during the hours immediately afterward. So the next time you open a refrigerator full of food and decide there is nothing to eat, remember the alternative. Thin strips of meat hanging beside a smoky fire, a storage pit hidden somewhere beneath the ground, a basket of dry seeds protected from rain, and one suspicious-looking bone your group has been saving for several weeks. Subscribe to Anciently Human for more stories about life before comfort, explained simply.